The Rangers lost their manager in waiting to the White Sox? Does this mean that Bruce Bochy is sticking around past this year? We're talking about all that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into today's show about Will Venable going to the Chicago White Sox, what that means for Bruce Bochy, and a little bit about what the Rangers should do at catcher next season, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, yesterday before the World Series, normally teams are pretty reticent to make news, drop reports about what's happening during the World Series as not to steal the thunder from the most important event in baseball. Thankfully, the Rangers and Diamondbacks didn't have their World Series spoiled by any breaking news about really anything else going on in baseball. But last night before the game, where the Dodgers could have clinched a World Series title, the White Sox decided to make some news in terms of who they are going to hire as their next manager. It is Rangers associate manager Will Venable. Venable has been with Texas since 2022. He has been basically tapped as the manager in waiting behind Bruce Bochy. Bochy came out of retirement before the 2023 season, signed a 3-year deal with Texas in that offseason. Before Texas got DeGrom, before they got Nathan Eovaldi, right? Basically, the first thing the Rangers did last offseason, or I guess 2 off seasons ago, was bring Bochy out of retirement. Bochy had been retired since after the 2019 season, and there was some thought that, okay, Bochy's going to come out for a little bit. Maybe he will retire at the end of those 3 years, especially when he got a ring. You thought, okay, maybe he'll come back for this next year. Maybe he'll come back for 2025 and then kind of see where he stands, because Bochy is going to be 70 years old this season. But Venable was always thought of as the next guy. He's turned 42 years old on Tuesday, the day that he got hired as the White Sox manager. And Venable was a guy who was considered for some managerial openings last year during the Rangers World Series run. He declined interviews. I believe it was with the Mets and the Guardians, both who had managerial vacancies. And both those teams went to the LCS this year. And so there were a couple of different Rangers coaches that were in the running for this White Sox managerial job. One of them was, of course, Will Venable, who ended up getting the job. The other was Donnie Ecker, the Rangers bench coach / offensive coordinator, guy who was very instrumental in the Rangers turning their offense around in 2023, making them one of the best hitting teams in baseball. Another guy who was largely responsible for that was Tim Hires, who left the Rangers this offseason to go sign and be a coach with the Atlanta Braves, citing a move closer to family, where his family lives in Georgia, so he wanted to be a little bit closer to them than he would be in Arlington. Makes total sense. The Rangers had a down year offensively this year. I don't think that was because of Hires or because of Ecker. I don't know exactly who they're going to hire as their next hitting coach. I think a likely candidate would be Seth Connor, who has been the assistant hitting coach for a couple seasons now. But it seems like the Rangers' succession plan for manager is, well, up in smoke. But maybe they don't need a succession plan. I mean, the fact that Will Venable is taking this managerial job with the White Sox. Yes, the same White Sox that just finished with the worst record in modern baseball history. One of the worst seasons we have ever seen. 41-121. That was their record last year. Pedro Grifol was not a very good manager. Grady Sizemore, as the interim, did a decent job, but I mean, he wasn't great. He wasn't the guy who they were looking for. Clearly, they had a, 21 game losing streak. It was the longest losing streak we have seen in many, many moons. And I got to say, I've spent a lot of time on Baseball Reference. And if you go and look at the 2024 Chicago White Sox Baseball Reference page, it is maybe one of the more depressing websites on the internet. You look at their everyday regulars, they did not have a single hitter in their everyday lineup. It was the primary starter at any position that had at least a 100 OPS plus. Not a single hitter that was even league average. Heck, you go and look through their entire roster, anybody who played for them at all, there are 2 hitters that had an OPS plus north of 100. There was Tommy Pham, who played 70 games and then was traded at the deadline, had a 104 OPS plus, so 4% better than league average. The only other guy on this roster with an OPS plus north of 100 was Yoan Moncada, who played 12 games, 756 OPS, 117 OPS plus. That's it. They had 29 hitters, and 2 of them were above league average. Not to mention the pitching also was not great. Garrett Crochet, who we thought it was a really, really good season, a 3.5 ERA in 32 starts, not even 150 innings. The bullpen was absolutely horrendous, and apparently they're going to cut payroll next year. Cut payroll. This team, the worst team we've ever seen, is like, you know what? We can get worse. We can get cheaper. We can make it that much worse. And I think that's an indication that he is taking this managerial job. I think there are a couple more managerial openings. Maybe there's not. Maybe it's just Cincinnati that already filled that role with Terry Francona. Maybe there will be more managerial openings later on this winter. But I think the fact, I say all this not to just dunk on the White Sox, who were horrendous, and Jerry Reinsdorf, if not for John Fisher, would be the worst owner in Major League Baseball in terms of the meddling, in terms of the, threatening to leave, in terms of the lack of resources allocated to his baseball team that is a historic franchise and has been in Chicago for, 150 years, forever. The fact that Will Venable is taking this job, maybe it's also a sign that he's regretting not at least interviewing for those other roles in the Mets and the Guardians as well last season. But the Rangers were in the middle of the playoffs, and I'm very glad that he didn't take those interviews and take time away from, helping whatever he was doing game planning wise for the Rangers in the 2023 playoffs, because they won the World Series. And I know that he was at least some part of it. Maybe it would have gone the same way if he ended up taking those managerial jobs. Maybe the Rangers would have been even worse without Will Venable on the bench this year. But I think all of this goes to show that Bruce Bochy might just be sticking around for the long haul. If this is the opening he's taking, if Bruce Bochy's contract is up after this season, I'm not confirming this, I'm not reporting this, just based on reading the tea leaves of knowing what's going on in baseball. If you take this managerial job, then maybe you got some word from Bruce Bochy to the effect of, hey, I know you might be the next guy that's going to be hired here whenever I, decide to actually retire this time. But that might not be a while. That might not be for some time. It's probably not going to be after this 2025 season. I'm hoping, because Bruce Bochy is one of, if not the best managers ever. And if the guy who everyone thought was going to be the next guy in line is taking a job with the worst franchise in baseball, one of the worst teams we've ever seen in baseball, it might be a good sign for the Rangers in the long term for Bruce Bochy. But is that a guarantee that since his contract is up after the season that he is going to stick around? We're going to talk about that and what the Rangers should do about their catching situation in 2025. All that and more right after this. This show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to get real money on the sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more on or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. PrizePicks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my pick hits, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. PrizePicks is the best way to get in the action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so you'll have to stay and play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup live. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Now, the Rangers have Bruce Bochy, their Hall of Fame manager, their all-time great manager, the first manager to ever win them their World Series. Hopefully, going to win them at least one, if not two, if not three more. Who knows how many World Series titles he'll stick around for. But I have a little bit of concern with Bruce Bochy in the long term. I think this is overall a good sign. Venable leaving for this job. Not that I wanted Will Venable to leave, and not that I wanted Will Venable to have to go and manage what might be an even worse Red Sox team next, or White Sox team. Sorry, all of my different colors of sock teams are getting mixed up in my head because we're almost at the off season. But I do have a little bit of concern for the Rangers keeping Bruce Bochy in the long term. I think he wants to stay here. I think he wants to stay in managing. He talked about it this season, how he still has that fire for managing, how he's still, loving, living and dying with the game of baseball, how much he missed it when he was away from the game from, 2020 to 2022. I mean, those years he was watching a lot of baseball, and when he got in the dugout for the World Baseball Classic qualifiers with Team France, he kind of felt that itch. And thankfully, Chris Young came a-calling at the right time, had the right game plan, got him out at exactly the perfect moment. But to keep him here past 2025, the Rangers need to contend. They need to win. They need to pour in those resources. They need to keep this window open, because right now the window is most definitely open. Without Bruce Bochy in 2023, there is no way in heck the Rangers win the World Series. I think there is absolutely no way in heck that they even make the playoffs in 2023 with a manager other than Bruce Bochy. I mean, this team got out to such a hot start. I then fell so far, so fast, and throughout all of those insane ups and downs. I mean, just the highest of highs, the lowest of lows in that regular season. Heck, even in the playoffs. I mean, there were a lot of really high highs. Heck, the Rangers won their first 7 straight playoff games, almost all of which came on the road. I think 6 of the first 7 were on the road, if my math is mathing correctly. Yes, all but that Game 3 clincher in the ALDS against the Orioles. All of those 6 of those first 7 games were on the road. And the Rangers had every right to feel so freaking high on themselves, so freaking proud of themselves. I mean, heck, getting them to bounce back after Game 162 when they lost the division on the final day, and to take that cross-country road flight, not road trip. Gosh, that would have been really awful if the Rangers had to drive all the way from Seattle, Tampa before that wild card series. But no, he got their heads right. He was a level, steadying presence throughout that entire season, never getting too high up, never getting too low. And that comforted this team. That gave them that balance, that equilibrium to return to every single time. Heck, when the Rangers were up 2-0 in the ALCS, I thought this team would never, ever lose a game again. But I didn't have Bruce Bochy hanging out with me every night saying, nope, don't get too high, don't get too low. We can still do this, but we got some ways to go. Heck, when the Rangers lost 3 straight games at home in the ALCS, I can't imagine how devastating it must have been to be a player on that roster, let alone me. I was absolutely gutted, devastated. I'm sure most of you were after that Game 5 when Jose Altuve hit that dumb home run that absolutely meant nothing in the long-term scheme of things. But this team didn't get too low. They bounced back. They took their off day. They said, "Wow, that sucked. We got a game on Sunday. Let's go and win that game." And then they did. And then they had a game 7 on Monday. And they said, "Okay, let's go beat the snot out of these guys and go to the World Series." And they freaking did, because Bruce Bochy and also the veterans in that clubhouse, I mean, the whole team culture of steadying presence, it emulated there. It felt like there was a little bit less of the steady presence this year because there was more legitimate reason for panic this year when they were around 500 at the deadline. I mean, it was honestly very impressive the level to which Bruce Bochy didn't rise and fall with the emotions of the season this year, and it didn't show panic in a year where I felt like there maybe needed to be a little bit more panic because this team was not as good as 2023. I thought they'd be better. Unfortunately, they were not. They did not make the playoffs. They did not, rally the troops and, even finish above 500 in a year where they very much could have. I don't think there are any more buttons Bochy could have pressed to fix this offense. I don't think there was much more this hitting staff could have done to make this offense go back to the way it was, or to keep pitchers healthier or whatever. I mean, I think he pulled all the levers he could. But Bruce Bochy's steadying presence is such an important thing to this team moving forward. He's a big part of this team bouncing back in 2025 because he's done it before. And I think a lot of how this team does in 2025 will determine if Bruce Bochy sticks around. I think he will. I feel confident they will. But if the Rangers have another offseason that's eerily similar to last offseason of saying, "We're fine. We trust our guys. We don't need to spend any money. The most important thing is staying under that luxury tax." Not that they can't stay under the luxury tax and still get good players and contend for next year. But if that is priority number one of staying well below it and just saving money as opposed to contending, when you have Bruce Bochy, when you have Corey Seager at his peak, when you are going into the season hoping for, planning for, praying for, doing all kinds of different whatever you do to hope to keep Jacob deGrom healthy for a full season. You got Jacob deGrom and Corey Seager healthy and in their prime for a full season. You're paying those guys a combined $72.5 million next year. If you're doing that and you have one of the greatest managers ever still in your dugout, you owe it to everyone to contend. So I think that if the Rangers have a below 500 season where they don't pour in resources this offseason, where they don't invest in their roster, where they are just more concerned about long-term financial viability than they are actually winning baseball games, it's going to send a bad message to Bruce Bochy of, hey, well, this team, we like having you here. We like having you around. It's nice to have this lineup, this, team, this, culture where you click, where you are, the leader of that culture, where you fit in very seamlessly. But we're just not clearly that serious about contending each and every single year. And if Bruce Bochy is putting his body through this, I mean, it's a physical toll it takes, not quite as much as playing every single day, not as much as being a catcher in Major League Baseball, but he's getting up there. There was a reason that he kind of retired, not retired, but basically retired after that 2019 season. It took its toll on him. You can see it every single time he walks to the mound. This guy is getting older. His body has been through a lot, and going there and being on the bench, doing what it takes to be a major league manager day in, day out, it is a grueling job, not only physically, but mentally as well. And if he's still got the fire for it and he's putting himself through this, if the Rangers aren't going to try and win, if they aren't going to put the resources around a team to try and win in 2026 and beyond, and every single year that Bruce Bochy is here, because they definitely tried to win this year, not as hard as I think they should have in terms of the resources and stuff poured into this team. But if they're not going to pour all that in there, if Bruce Bochy doesn't feel like this team is incredibly serious about winning being priority number one, then do you not think that every single team in Major League Baseball is going to jump out of their shoes to go and sign Bruce Bochy to be their manager? I mean, how many managers in Major League Baseball do you think are better than Bruce Bochy right now? One, two, three. I don't think it's three. I don't think it's even one. And if you had a contending club with a managerial vacancy, or heck, even a manager who's just not Bruce Bochy, which is basically it is literally every other manager in Major League Baseball, I guarantee you teams would be crawling out of their skin to go show Bruce Bochy, hey, if that team's not serious about competing, we will get you a winning ball club and get you a chance for even more World Series titles. Because I know that is something this guy desperately wants. But if the Rangers want to win a World Series title in 2025, they might just need to do something. Well, they will need to sign at least one catcher for their backup. But what are they going to do about Jonah Heim? Is there someone on the market that could be the Rangers' everyday starter? And if so, who should it be? Talk about all that and more right after this. This show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, and not just for Major League Baseball games. If you want to go check out a Mavs game, whether you want to go check out a Stars game, whether for some reason you want to go watch the Cowboys in person, you want to hurt your own feelings, or if you want to go watch something that's not sports, whether it's comedy, whether it's music, whether it's theater, they've got tickets for all kinds of different events. Gametime Picks, it creates and curates it makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets and more with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Now, the Rangers have some questions at catcher next season. Most notably, backup catcher. If the Rangers want to sign literally nobody this offseason, then it seems likely Sam Huff will be the backup. But with how bad the Rangers' backup catching situation was this year, with them making the trade for Carson Kelly, who was just not that great after the Rangers traded for him, with them signing a theoretically offense first catcher in Andrew Kisner, who had a 394 OPS in 93 plate appearances, was just straight up terrible offensively. If they couldn't get Sam Huff more than 3 games and 4 plate appearances worth of work in this year, with not only that, but Jonah Heim being one of the worst catchers in baseball this year, that I don't think that next year is the year that they finally start believing in Sam Huff. I think that ship has very much sailed, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Huff didn't have a 40-man spot on this roster by the end of this year. By the end of December, I think there might be Rule 5 guys that they want to protect more than Sam Huff. So there are some options out there. I think notably bringing back Carson Kelly, who, even though he didn't have a great season, I think if the Rangers liked what they saw from him, he could be a fit. He's going to be 31 next year. And catchers are expensive. They are going to be very expensive. Heck, even the backup catchers at times can be expensive. Next year, they are just, I think the main plan is hoping that Jonah Heim can bounce back. He's going to make probably around $5.2 million in arbitration next season, which is quite a bit of money. That would make him the 15th highest paid catcher in Major League Baseball. 15. There are several backups higher on this list in terms of guys who have signed just bigger contracts in general. I mean, Austin Barnes as a backup catcher signed a $7 million deal for 2 years. Sean Murphy signed that massive $73 million deal. There's not a whole lot of catchers that are signing, deals $50 million or higher. There's literally 5 of them in Major League Baseball, and 2 of them are already surefire Hall of Famers in Salvador Perez and JT Realmuto. And Will Smith will probably eventually get there since he's only 28. But these catchers are freaking expensive. And in terms of the other options, I think the Rangers are going to have to buy low on somebody, but I think they're going to need somebody to split time with Jonah Heim. Maybe not move Jonah Heim off of the everyday catcher role, But I think someone to spell him more often, more frequently, get more of a kind of 1A, 1B situation with the catching situation, which I think they were hoping for with Kisner. They were hoping that Kisner would provide at least something for them offensively. He was a bat first catcher. But the thing with catchers is you never know how good their offense is going to be year to year. You just never know. There's some other interesting options. The only guy who I see as a legitimate everyday starter on the free agent market is Danny Jansen, who's coming off of his worst career year offensively. I mean, he's had other seasons in the past where he's been not an all-star, but borderline. He is very rarely caught. He's actually only once in his career caught more than 92 games. I mean, last year was the second most games he's ever caught in 91. He had, or 91 games played, I should say. There were some DH days there as well. 2019, he played 107 games. He's got a 727 career OPS. He's had seasons, a couple of seasons, 4 seasons actually, where he had double-digit home runs. That was back in 2019. He also did that in 2021, 22, and 23, all years where he had an OPS north of 770, including a career high 855 OPS in 72 games as the tandem catcher with Alejandro Kirk back in 2022. He is projected to sign a 2-year, $8.9 million deal. That's 4.4 mil average annual value. I think he's a guy who could be interesting. There's some other guys on this market. Kyle Higashioka, who's coming off of a career season. I'm a little worried about signing a 35-year-old catcher who would never hit this many home runs coming off of this year. $1.6 million. I think that's would be fine value offensively or just per dollar for a backup catcher. I think he could be that kind of 1B role. He had 16 home runs last season. He was an above average hitter by OPS plus 101 OPS plus, 17 bombs last year from a catcher. That's pretty solid. He was pretty much their everyday catcher, but he only played in 84 games. He was with the Yankees. Before that, he's been a fine backup, a fine 1B option. There is also the option of Yasmani Grandal, who is coming off of a real nice bounce back season for a couple of years there, almost north of half a decade. He was one of the more consistent offensive catchers in baseball. I mean, he had an all-star season with the Dodgers. He got MVP votes that next year in 2016. He got MVP votes, top 15 at MVP, and was an all-star in Milwaukee back in 2019, where he had 28 bombs as a catcher. Heck, there was a streak from 2016 to 2021. You throw out that 2020 season. All those full seasons, he had 20 or more home runs in all of those seasons. Heck, in 2021, he was going in for a career high year, had a 939 OPS in just 93 games, 23 bombs that year, a 420 on base, and a 520 slugging percentage from a freaking catcher. It's incredible. Signed a big deal with Chicago. I think that might have been that offseason before. Where he was fine in 2020, amazing in 2021, and then horrendous in 22. And it was fine in 2023. And then last year was about fine. I mean, at 704 OPS, he slugged 400, had an on-base percentage north of 300, 304 at 35. Projected to sign a 1-year, $1.3 million deal. Still hitting the ball hard, walked at a good rate, struck out at a, above league average rate, better than league average, I should say, not above, just better than league average rate. I think he's a guy who could make sense. He's going to be, 35. He's got some offensive pop. He's a switch hitter. I think he could make a lot of sense. He's a former first round pick. He's got that upside. Catchers are so freaking unpredictable. Just so unpredictable. There could be a chance that Jonah Heim just bounces back and looks like all-star Jonah Heim next year. I'm hoping that's the case. Really hoping that's the case. And, he was fantastic. Yasmani Grandal was fantastic at framing last year in the top 15% of baseball in terms of the best framers. But there's one guy who I don't think he could quite carry the offensive load that the Rangers would hope for catcher. But in terms of just fit with the team and the team culture, what about bringing back Austin Hedges? Last year, he signed a $4 million deal to be a negative 0.6 WAR player. He was, again, horrendous offensively. That is kind of the deal with Hedges. But in terms of the vibes and the clubhouse presence and just the everything about him, I think there are some intangibles that are very worthwhile in bringing Austin Hedges back. Now, should the Rangers bring him back and play him 80 games and try and fit his bat into the lineup, find some kind of magic in that bat that hasn't had an OPS north of 600 since 2018? Probably not. But I think in terms of just a vibes situation, I really think that it sounds stupid and it sounds gimmicky, but I really think there is something to the vibes component of a player. I really think there is something to that clubhouse culture, and Hedges fit like a freaking glove last year. Jankowski, another great bench vibes guy who I think the Rangers are probably going to bring back as who will end up being, I think, their fifth outfielder, depending on how certain other things turn out, whether it's going to be Leody Taveras as the Rangers' fourth outfielder. I think that a guy like Hedges really fits into this culture. I mean, the way he manages his staff, the way he keeps the room loose, I think that there's really something to that. Not just the culture of, the superstars establishing it, not just the culture being established by guys like Bruce Bochy from the top down, from guys like Chris Young. I think everybody on that team, from the top of the roster to the bottom of the roster, is such an important part. And I wouldn't bring back Austin Hedges for a $4 million deal, but if he signs somewhere in the $1.1 million deal range that he is projected to sign according to Spot Track, I'd do that in a heartbeat and bring back Austin Hedges. Now, would the Rangers need a huge bounce back from Jonah Heim? Yeah. But I think that all of these options of these, I think Grandal might be my number one pick. If Carson Kelly is signing a $2.2 million deal, I don't know if that's necessarily worth it for the Rangers. Higashioka kind of worries me a little bit that that offense is going to fall off a cliff. But honestly, these are all catchers. You could say that about just about anybody. But I think even though it was a bummer for the Rangers to lose Will Venable, I'm hoping that it's a great sign about Bruce Bochy staying here in the long term. And in terms of the catchers, this is an important thing for this Rangers offseason. It's going to be one of the bats that I know for sure they will sign, and whatever they end up going with, I trust Chris Young's vision in hopefully getting a lot more offense from their catcher next season. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing. And thank you to the Yankees for letting me say this for at least one more day. Until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.